Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here. It's good to see you. I want to focus on the labor market a little bit here. You said a couple of weeks ago that published unemployment rates have dramatically understated the deterioration in the labor market. And as I understand it, that difference is mostly about the decline in labor force participation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So that's something that I clearly see in Iowa. Our unemployment in December actually fell back below 3.5%, but that ignores about 130,000 Iowans who've just left the labor force completely. Is that something that you will be looking at closely when it comes to determining if the economy is at full employment, those folks who have literally just left the market?
Yes, it is. We say that we look at a broad range of things, and it's important to say that we look at the employment rate and employment to population in particular as a statistic that combines labor force participation and unemployment.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. So, changing course here a little bit, we've seen about 4 million people leave the labor force. Almost 60% of those have been women, despite them making up, of course, less of the labor force before the pandemic hit. And then we hit a 33-year low last month, and more than 1 million more women have lost their jobs than men. I would ask you, Chairman Powell, what do you think is the reason for this kind of disparity? And is that something you're going to consider when you're evaluating full employment?
It's a combination of two things, I believe. One of which is that women are within the labor force overrepresented in those public-facing service sector jobs. The other just is with the closure of many schools, parents are staying home, and that burden has fallen more on mothers than it has on fathers. Those are the two pieces of that, I think. And both of those should dissipate, and we'd go back to hopefully something closer to where we were, where people worked if they wanted to work, and they did childcare if they wanted to do that instead. So as the pandemic comes to an end, we hope that people once again be able to make those choices without taking into account the fact that the schools are closed, for example. So
Thank you. Listen, I'm so glad to hear you bring up childcare because apparently more than $50 billion a year is what the lack of childcare costs our country. Do you think that helping families find affordable childcare could help the economy? And do you think that would help us get back to full employment more quickly?
I do think that's an area that's worth looking at. And again, I don't want to comment on I don't know what's in your discussions, but I don't want to comment on that. I will say many other countries, our peers, our competitors, advanced economy democracies, have a more built up function and for childcare, and they wind up having substantially higher labor force participation among women. We used to lead the world in female labor force participation a quarter century ago, and we no longer do. And it may just be that those policies have put us behind.
I appreciate you saying that. Countries like Germany, UK, and Canada have moved forward with higher levels of that participation because of those programs. And it's absolutely something we need to address in this country. Obviously, even before the pandemic, it was prohibitively expensive for families. I've been there. I have two boys, and at the most expensive time, even 15 years ago, it was you had to save $20,000 after taxes, and that was 15 years ago for a couple kids. So I know that this is really hurting Americans, and there are childcare deserts. The lack of childcare and paid leave as well really limits the choices for women in America. And every time one of them leaves the workforce to take care of a child, it sets their career back multiple years. So I just want to be clear, this isn't just a women's issue, it's a family issue, it's an economic issue. And I worry that the current crisis for childcare could get even worse. It's why it's so important to address these types of long-term issues if we're going to be back to where we need to be as a country. I would also encourage you to look at how paid family leave, paid sick leave, all of those issues impact opportunity for women and for families, which in turn, of course, impacts our overall economy. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. Appreciate everything that you're doing to try, make sure that we're informed and keeping our country moving forward. And I'd encourage you to take a look at those issues. And lastly, I'd say on the paid family leave, is that something else that you would be considering looking at when it comes to labor market?
Those are decisions that lie in your hands, but I do think it's worth looking at these. As the United States falls behind in labor force participation, we need to be asking why that is the case what are the ways we can be more competitive on.
Thank you.